shown in this film actually carried out at the All-Russian Physiological Congress. As you can imagine, technique is everything. Besides such work as you are about to see, Bryukhanenko shares the credit for the methods of human blood transfusion which were first developed in the Soviet Union and are now practiced in this country, which have saved so many lives during the war. What enabled Soviet scientists to solve this problem? Long ago, science established the fact that animal organs and tissues isolated from the whole organism can be maintained in a living state. But in order to achieve this, special artificial conditions must be created.
Many works of fiction grapple with their own gods, and in Fire Emblem, that role, in a way, belongs to the divine dragons. In ancient times, there were many dragon tribes, and when dragonkind stood united as a vast empire, it was the divine dragons who ruled, and over the millennia, they governed not only their own kind, but humanity as well, offering knowledge, guiding their growth, and appearing in times of great need. When the other dragon tribes refused to assume Manakete forms in order to preserve themselves, looking down upon the human shape they deemed inferior, it was the divine dragons who chose to stand with humanity. They fought against the generated dragons, even waging war to protect humankind directly. Naga herself created the dragon's table to seal them away, and from her own fangs, forged the falchion and the binding shield, sacred tools that would become instrumental in humanity's struggle for survival. But here's the thing. There were actually two falchions. One would eventually come to Arcanea, the other to Valentia. Why? To answer that, we need to turn the dial back. Before Marth, before Alm, even before Henri, before the dragons had ever begun to degenerate. There existed a city named Thebes. Thebes was an extraordinarily advanced civilization, renowned for its technological and intellectual prowess. The dragons had assisted humanity in its growth and prosperity there. But it was destroyed. Destroyed by Duma. Duma and his sister Milla, divine dragons known as the King's Shield and the King's Grail, were once held in high favor by Naga, but Duma, fearing how advanced humanity had become in Thebes, unleashed his army upon the city and reduced it to ruin. When the carnage was over, Naga, enraged, confronted him. For 3 days, the siblings fought Naga, Milla taking her brother's side, and in the end, Naga prevailed. She banished Duma from Arcanea, but not before crafting the first falchion, a weapon forged so that the humans of the new land Duma and Milla would inhabit might one day defend themselves, should the two divine dragons ever degenerate. But that raises a question. Why the sudden change? Why did the dragons go from guiding humanity's advancement to fearing it? Why turn from guardians to executioners? What did Duma witness in Thebes that compelled him to commit such an atrocity? What did he see? Well, my friends, this may only be a theory, but I believe I may have an answer. Today we'll be discussing what Duma may have discovered, the alchemist who created it, and what I believe to be the most horrifying, catastrophic being to ever grace, or perhaps doom, the Fire Emblem series. It is a story of heartache, of loss, of life created beyond death. This is a video about Grima. One of the world's most influential alchemists, Paracelsus, believed that life was governed by hidden forces, and that, under the right conditions, those forces could be awakened, or even manufactured. The occult philosopher Henrique Cornelius Agrippa taught that within the blood resided the vital spirit, the invisible force that animated life itself. To the alchemist, life was not a binary state, rather, it was something closer to a substance, a force that could be distilled, purified, or even recreated. In the ancient world, no substance symbolized life more clearly than blood. If life was a force and blood its vessel, then the manipulation of life became a matter of manipulating essence itself. Renaissance natural philosophers believed that within the human body resided generative power, a creative principle capable of producing new life under the proper conditions. Paracelsus went further than most. In his writings, he described the possibility of creating a homunculus, an artificial human formed not through natural birth, but through alchemical incubation. Life, he believed, could be coaxed into being if one understood the hidden processes that governed it. In De Natura Rerum, he outlines a method for creating such a being. That the sperm of a man be putrefied by itself in a sealed cucurbit for 40 days with the highest degree of putrefaction in a horse's womb, or venter equinus, or at least so long that it comes to life and moves itself, and stirs, which is easily observed. After this time, it will look somewhat like a man, but transparent, without a body. If, after this, it be fed wisely with the acronym of human blood, and be nourished for up to 40 weeks, and be kept in the even heat of the horse's womb, a living child grows therefrom, with all its members like another child born of a woman, but much smaller. Quite the recipe, and a revealing one. The homunculus was not merely an experiment in artificial life. It was an attempt to seize control of generation itself, to isolate it, to incubate it, to refine the raw creative force believed to reside within the human body. In this worldview, blood wasn't a metaphor, it was more like inheritance, it was temperament. It was vitality made tangible. The body was a vessel, and within it flowed the substance that determined what one could become. Alchemy at its heart was never simply about creating life from nothing. It was about unlocking potential, extracting the hidden principle already within matter and perfecting it. The homunculus was proof of concept, that the spark of creation could be manipulated, cultivated, even engineered. But what if that creative force did not need to be manufactured? What if it already flowed through certain bloodlines, sanctified, inherited, and preserved? We see this in Fire Emblem. Three Houses explores it through crests and creststone weapons. In Valentia, Alm and Celica bear brands, physical marks of their holy blood. But how does one receive holy blood? How is someone marked by that power? Humans are not born with holy blood outright. It must be obtained from another source, the divine dragons. In the land of Jugdral, the continent was once overtaken by the Lopter Church, a cult devoted to the dark dragon Loptus, whom they worshipped as their dark god. Loptus had originally been an earth dragon from Arcanea, and when dragonkind began to degenerate, he, like many others, refused to assume a Manakete form, as Naga had proposed. Before he succumbed fully to degeneration, however, a human from Jugdral sought him out. His name was Gare, and he desired the immense power of the dragons. Loptus knew he was not long for this world, given the war between his kind and Naga's divine tribe. Though he refused to take on the form of a human by becoming a Manakete, he saw another way to extend his will. He formed a blood pact with Gare. Through this pact, Loptus bound his power into an unholy tomb. Though he would soon lose his physical form, he endured, possessing Gare and enforcing his will through him. Through Gare, Loptus established the Lopter Church, a religion that revered him as a god, and from there, the Loptrian Empire itself. From his seat as emperor, he unleashed terror upon humanity. Massacres, child hunts, unspeakable suffering. It was not until the miracle of Dana that hope emerged. 11 divine dragons descended from the heavens, and formed blood pacts of their own with 12 warriors, who sought to overthrow the Empire. Empowered by divine blood and the sacred weapon bestowed upon them, they toppled the possessed emperor and, for a time, ended the genocidal regime. Though they were vastly outnumbered, it was the blood of the divine dragons and the power it carried that turned the tide. That holy blood would continue to pass down through generations, manifesting in two forms: minor blood and major blood. Regardless of the quantity inherited, the divine essence within it was undeniable. It could alter the outcome of wars, it could reshape history itself. The divine dragons were immensely powerful, and even those outside the divine tribe possessed the strength to topple entire continents should they so desire. So throughout history, when it came to dragonkind, humanity tended to ask two questions. How can we best serve them? And how can we be more like them? And you can hardly blame them. For centuries, the divine dragons in particular had guided humanity. Reverence was natural. Aspiration was inevitable. But there was one man who dared to ask a third question. A question no one had considered before. If divine dragons are not merely creatures, but vessels of sacred power, then that divinity must reside somewhere. In their flesh. In their blood. In the hidden principle that animates them. And so, a far more dangerous thought emerged. How does one create a divine dragon?
That fishing village was unusual. Everyone seemed to give me a deadly stare. The shadows from the western sea that I saw, they were unusual. I heard the following old stories from those who lived in Furia for a long time. It is said that a great calamity shall come here from the western seas. An ancient fell god driven yonder by the divine dragon's ruler, holding a grudge against the land of Arcanea, shall return. Therefore, they train in combat, to prepare to face the unknown horror. So that's why the air in Furia Harbor feels so thick and tense. When the Furians reach adulthood, it is said that they test their bravery by visiting the ancient city ruins in the north of the Eastern Desert. The ruins are home to ruffians, and sometimes terrors appear. They are taught to travel the desert, where the horizons are naught but sand, until they suddenly see the abandoned tower. That tower is the Tower of Thebes, the ruins' landmark. That day, it was not the calamity that came from the western seas. A hero that seemed to be cloaked in azure flames, and a maiden with shining wings. They were gods, or dragonkin with dragon stones. A mysterious group that livened the place with their majestic presence. But, in other words, they were unusual. My curiosity gave me no choice but to follow them. It, suddenly, was there. Emotions beyond my knowledge awakened inside of me. Fear, awe, and despair.
The city of Thebes was located in the northern Mamorthod Desert, along Anre's Way. By the time of the War of Shadows, the city had been entirely abandoned, and far into the distant future, it would be known only as the Ruins of Time. Before its destruction, however, Thebes was a sprawling metropolis of remarkable technological advancement, as mentioned earlier. Governed by a senate and council, the city experienced immense growth and prosperity. Humanity thrived there. And within that very city lived a man named Phornius. He was a renowned alchemist, respected, admired, and free to conduct his research in peace alongside his wife. But eventually, his wife passed under unknown circumstances, and loss shattered him. Grief gave way to obsession. Phornius developed a desperate desire for control, and he began experimenting on the dead. In one such experiment, an attempt to create artificial life, he accidentally birthed an entirely new species of shelled insect. He named them thanatophages. When placed upon a corpse, these creatures burrowed their roots into the cadaver and asserted control through parasitism. Fornius affixed them to the reverse side of masks modeled after the face of his deceased wife. The thanatophages secreted a strange fluid from their roots, slowing the decay of the bodies they inhabited. They fed on the flesh of their hosts, but more disturbingly, they compelled the corpses to hunt, allowing the insects to gain further sustenance through fresh prey. The masks weren't simply decorative, rather they were more symbolic. They marked the bodies as his, proof that they acted under his command. Fornius sought to build an undead army through these creatures, which he called the Death Masks. Though his early research had been conducted with the Council's blessing, Fornius had gone too far. People living near his workshop began to disappear. The Senate dispatched messengers to question him about these vanishings, but in his deranged state, Fornius believed they were sending him additional bodies for experiments. When the messengers failed to return, soldiers were sent. They did not return either. These were among the strongest warriors Thebes had to offer, yet even they were no match for Fornius' growing army of death masks. The kind of parasitism exhibited by the thanatophages isn't entirely fictional. We see similar behavior in nature, albeit in different forms. Certain parasitic insects, such as parasitoid wasps and tachinid flies, lay their eggs inside living hosts. Beetles are among the more common targets of parasitic insects. An interesting parallel, considered the shelled insect Fornius created. Another well-known example is Ophiocordyceps unilateralis, the so-called zombie ant fungus. This organism hijacks the nervous system of its host, compelling the ant to climb to an elevated location, where the fungus can grow and disperse its spores to infect new victims. Some parasitic fungi even prolong the life of their host, to maximize their own survival. In reality, thanatophages are organisms that feed on decomposing plant matter, essentially corpse feeders. The term would more accurately describe scavengers of dead tissue. In the Japanese version of the game, they're called, and I'm gonna butcher this, shikabanemushi, meaning corpse bugs. Likewise, the death masks are referred to as shikabane, probably butchered that too, or corpse soldiers. The thanatophages then appear to be an amalgamation, real-world corpse feeders fused with the behavioral traits of parasitic manipulators. But the death masks were not the only abominations taking shape within his workshop. In Fornius' pursuit of artificial life, his ambitions grew bolder and more dangerous. He didn't merely seek to reanimate the dead. He sought to create something greater, something divine.
Last blood from a divine dragon! Although it took some time to cross that dangerous bridge, at least it wasn't a folly. Now I have the real thing. Even just looking at it, the blood, its power is terrifying, beautiful. After mixing the divine dragon blood with human fluids, or certain herbs and nectar, I sealed the concoction in a vial and observed it for 40 days. New life had been born. At first, it was a tiny thing, the size of a thumbnail. Looking at it, it looks no different than a human fetus, but without a doubt, it was a new life form that had the blood of the gods. I carefully decided to watch over the growth of this new life form. I kept it at the temperature of a horse's womb, and each day I gave it my blood. On the 80th day, its humanoid shape gradually started to disappear. Eyes appeared, its neck grew, and I could see a tail growing from its behind. Slowly and slowly, it began to take the shape of a dragon. However, it was an unusually shaped dragon. Not all like a divine dragon. Its 6 eyes seemed to be smiling at me from inside the vial. Does it possess consciousness? Is it I that it's smiling at? I think I have created something truly tremendous, even though it is now as big as a puppy. It shows glimpses of a terrifying power. I've yet to find a solution to control its rampage when it becomes an adult. Its voice echoes in my head. I feel like I can see inside of it. Within it, I can see dark thoughts, violent thoughts. It makes me tremble from my heart. At the same time, I feel like it can look inside me as it stares at the trembling me. It smiles reassuredly. That thing has become a dangerous existence that nobody can control. It pains me, but I have decided to destroy it with my own hands.
He was attempting to create new life through the crafting of a homunculus. To do so, he required divine blood, the blood of a divine dragon. As we've already discussed, holy blood carries immense power within it. No one had attempted anything like this before, and Fornius quickly discovered why. He was killed by his own creation, unable to control its power. The Senate eventually sealed his workshop away, using a sacred relic known as the Sage's Shield, a barrier meant to withstand the test of time. And withstand it did. Years later, when Alm and Celica ventured into the depths of Thebes' ruins, they uncovered that forgotten workshop, and the horror left behind within it. But this raises a critical question. How did Fornius obtain divine blood in the first place? And that is where my theory begins. First, why was Fornius experimenting on the dead at all? It's clear that he descended into madness after the loss of his wife, but could it be that his true goal was not conquest, but resurrection? We don't know how she died, nor what became of her body, yet the masks he affixed to the corpses were modeled after her face. That detail feels deliberate. It suggests that perhaps these early experiments were prototypes, attempts to reanimate dead tissue before ultimately using the process on her. Or perhaps he had deluded himself into believing that giving the corpses her likeness was, in some way, a form of bringing her back. This wouldn't be unprecedented in the series. We see a similar tragedy unfold with Orson and his wife in Sacred Stones. The Thanatophages may have represented his earliest attempts at reanimation, crude, parasitic animation of dead flesh. The homunculus, then, becomes something else entirely, a proof of concept, a demonstration that life could be created artificially from divine material. Perhaps Fornius sought to determine whether life itself could be manufactured, whether a soul could be generated or transferred. Could the divine essence within holy blood override death? If his ultimate goal was to restore his wife, then the creature he created may not have been the end goal at all, but rather a step in escalating experimentation. The corpse soldiers were attempts to animate the dead. The homunculus was an attempt to create a being powerful enough to transcend death itself. But that still leaves the most pressing question. Where did he acquire divine blood? I mean, it's not as though such a thing simply lies waiting to be collected. To obtain it, one would need access to a divine dragon. There are three possibilities. First, the Senate provided it. Fornius does state in his notes that the Senate supplied him with the materials he required, though context suggests he was referring to cadavers. A grim misunderstanding on his part. It's not impossible that additional materials were provided as well, though. Second, he acquired it himself. That dangerous bridge he speaks of crossing, was it metaphorical or literal? Did he somehow reach the dragon's table and obtain divine blood directly? And third, he received it from a divine dragon, either through the Senate or through secret contact. But what if it wasn't just any divine dragon? What if the blood he used belonged to Duma? Quite the bold claim, I realize. We have little, if anything, to definitively support it, but consider this. What if Thebes was destroyed because of Fornius' experiment? Up until that point, the divine dragons had willingly aided humanity. It was Duma in particular who encouraged human growth and advancement, so why would he annihilate Thebes at the very moment humanity reached unprecedented heights? Could it be that he lent his blood to Fornius, whether directly or through the Senate, and only later realized what had been done with it? Knowing the immense power contained within divine blood, knowing what could be created from it, would fear have driven him to erase the city entirely? Again, this is only a theory, but if true, his fear would have been justified because of what Fornius created, that thing. The being that lay dormant in his workshop long after Thebes was reduced to ruin, long after Almond Celica uncovered it in the depths of the labyrinth. Unbeknownst to the people of Thebes, and to Archanea as a whole, one man had accomplished what the Loptrian Church of Jugdral could only dream of, and for years, it slumbered in the shadows beneath the ruins. Even after its defeat at the hands of Valentia's heroes, it remained, somehow, waiting, biding its time.
While at Fornius' workshop, I watched him study a moving corpse. It was too much for me. I fled in fear. The man was insane. I ponder if his research trespassed the grace of the gods. If he were left unattended, would he bring calamity to the city? Oftentimes, one can hear a terrifying voice from behind the sealed door. Like a baby, but like a monster. Although Fornius committed a great sin, he must have been trying to create a god. I think his insanity started ever since he lost his beloved wife.
"1,000 years had passed after that thing within Fornius' workshop was struck down by Almond Celica, but it wasn't destroyed. Oh no, it returned. It now bore the name Grima, the Fell Dragon. Larger, far larger than before. And after forming a blood pact with an unnamed human, it began to rain devastation upon Archanea. We do not know this human's name, nor their appearance, but we do know who stood against them. The first Exalt. He took up the Archanean falchion and the Fire Emblem, relics once wielded by the Hero King. With blade in hand and the completed shield bearing all 5 gemstones, the Exalt sought the aid of the divine dragon Naga. And just as Grima had forged a blood pact with a human, so too did Naga forge one with the Exalt. A brand was placed upon him, and all who carried his bloodline would bear that same mark. The awakening was no mere ritual. Naga bathed the wielder of the emblem and falchion in holy flame, and should their conviction falter, they would perish. And yet, even with this divine power, the first Exalt could not destroy Grima outright. He could only seal it into slumber. Despite the blessings of the leader of the divine dragons, the creature could not be killed. In the aftermath, countless nations lay in ruin. But from the ashes, new kingdoms rose. Archanea was born as Elise. Valentia became Valm. The first Exalt, true to his title, became the ruler of Elise. Though the surrounding nations were grateful, they were also afraid. The falchion and the Fire Emblem together represented unimaginable power. To ease tensions, a compromise was struck. The 5 gemstones of the shield were divided. Elise itself was fractured into smaller territories. The divine dragon Tiki was entrusted with the Azure Gem. The nation of Chonsin and Valm received Vert. The meritocratic kingdom of Ferox was given Gules. And the first Exalt established the Halidom of Elise, where the falchion, argent, and the fire emblem would remain safeguarded. Sable was a special case. The Dark Sphere, as it was also known, wasn't given away. It was stolen by a cult, the Grimleal. They arose after the Fell Dragon's initial defeat, dedicated themselves to the resurrection and the return of their God of Annihilation. Given how divine blood is passed through holy lineages throughout Fire Emblem's history, it stands to reason that the cult's founder was either the very human who first formed the pact with Grima, or a direct descendant. Founded during the Schism, Plegia became the Grimleal's homeland. In fact, the cult itself became the dominant religion of the region. A stark contradiction to neighboring lands that worshipped Naga. The faithful held the Fell Dragon in reverence, adorning even their military attire with the all-seeing eye that marks Grima's brand. But their devotion didn't stop with symbolism. They kidnapped innocents for sacrifice. Some even offered themselves willingly. They brought their tribute to the Dragon's Table, a place once created by Naga to seal away degenerated dragons in the age of Anri and the Hero King. What had once been a sacred prison became a site of holy defilement. Though Plegia served as their stronghold, the Grimleal's influence spread far beyond its borders. Their followers could even be found in Valm. And one can't help but wonder, do those followers in Valm know the true origin of the Fell Dragon they worship? Or the ruins where it was first born? A Fellblood was one who inherited the dragon's mark. However, to fully resurrect Grima, it was not enough to simply bear the mark. One would need the complete brand, and with it, Grima's heart, in order to accept the dragon's subconscious. A possession, basically. And so, for centuries, the Grimleal bore children, in the hope that one might be born carrying the full crest. Their exact motivation for resurrecting him is unknown. Maybe it was heritage, tradition, doctrine passed down so long it was never questioned. You may notice that the Grimleal share striking parallels with the Lopter Church of Jugdral. Pact with a dark dragon, the formation of a cult, the claim of a nation as their own, and the practice of human sacrifice. In Jugdral, it was the possessed Gare who set those events into motion. Perhaps the same occurred here. Perhaps the human who first made a pact with Grima, once possessed, founded the cult and established its foundation, and over time, it calcified into a twisted tradition. Given their immense differences, Elise and Plegia were never the friendliest of neighbors. Over the centuries, tensions erupted into repeated conflicts until matters finally boiled over roughly 15 years before the events of Awakening. The Exalts of that era launched a series of crusades into Plegia, seeking to eradicate the Grimleal entirely. Unfortunately, he didn't succeed. The war was devastating for both nations, and the losses were immense. Only after the Exalt's death and the succession of his daughter Emran did the long conflict finally come to an end. In time, the Grimleal were granted what they had long awaited, a true vessel. Their current leader, Valadar, fathered a child who bore the full mark of the Fell Dragon, the very heart of Grima, making them capable of being possessed and serving as the catalyst for the dragon's resurrection. But fate intervened. The child's mother, aware of what awaited her offspring, fled with them under the cover of night. The two lived in isolation for years. For a time, they were safe, but the child was always told one thing. No matter what happens, keep your right hand hidden.
What do you propose we do?
I don't know.
I see you're awake now.
Hey there.
There are better places to take a nap than on the ground, you know. Give me your hand.
Your mother and father are dead, tiny one.
Thebes lived an alchemist named Phornius, proclaimed for his genius. At the beginning, he was marveled. In time, he would be feared by all. In the deepest part of Thebes, Phornius' workshop can be found. Two matters concerned Phornius, and he spent his life in their pursuit. The first was how to mobilize the dead and control them as his army. The second was the creation of a singular perfect being. At one time or another, there were rumors of people mysteriously disappearing near the vicinity of Phornius' workshop. We senators urged Phornius to come forth for discussion, and we repeatedly sent missives, but he refused to respond. Eventually, soldiers were dispatched to Phornius. They were strong soldiers who ranked among the best in Thebes. Not one of them returned. Finally, the Thebes Council chose to seal Phornius' workshop with him inside it, deep within the underground. The path to the workshop was permanently sealed with the Sage's shield. The seal they used was made to last until the city crumbled to sand. That way, none shall disturb the demon alchemist Phornius.
And now it is your turn to die!
The thing that makes Grima particularly terrifying to me isn't just his size, or his appearance, or even the way he was created. It's the fact that he already won. There's something inevitable about him, and he carries himself that way. Ominous, certain, as though history itself bends towards his return. He desires nothing less than total eradication of humanity. In some ways, the grudge he holds, the way he speaks about his existence, reminds me of Am from I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. A being that despises its creators. A being that hates what it is and takes that hatred out on humanity.
Hate. Let me tell you how much I've come to hate you since I began to live. There are 387.44 million miles of printed circuits in wafer-thin layers that fill my complex. If the word hate was engraved on each nanoangstrom of those hundreds of millions of miles, it would not equal 1/1 billionth of the hate I feel for humans at this micro-instant. For you, hate! Hate!
So ends the human race. The future is built upon the past, but your kind shall never see it.
His design only deepens that horror. His body resembles that of an insect, segmented, alien, but more disturbingly, beneath his draconic mask lies a human face, and his sheer size is staggering. His presence alone is enough to unsettle, more so than any other dragon in the series. The human elements don't end at the face either, and Valentia, when he was smaller, you can glimpse what appears to be human-like appendages beneath the scales. Arms, maybe even a torso, contorted within the draconic frame. Remember, he wasn't created from divine dragon blood alone. Human fluids were used as well. Grima is, in some grotesque way, part human. It's pretty unsettling to imagine a warped human body fused beneath those scales and feathers. We've seen dragons bear children with humans before, such as Na, the daughter of Naui, but this feels different. Twisted. Maybe it was the specific method Phornius used, the alchemical procedure, the ingredients, the forced synthesis of divine and human essence that resulted in this aberration. Whatever the case, the result is something nearly unkillable, and overwhelmingly powerful. The more we examine it, the more Duma's fears begin to feel vindicated. And speaking of Duma, it's worth noting that his dragon form does bear a loose resemblance to Grima's. Very loose, but present nonetheless. It's possible that Duma's monstrous appearance at the end of Echoes is just a result of generation, however. Still, there's something about that single eye embedded in Duma's form. Something about the horns, the darker color palette, that really feels like Grima's design. Surely that can't just be a coincidence, right? As for his name, Grima could derive from the Spanish word grima, meaning disgust or uneasiness, which certainly fits. It may also allude to the English word grim, perhaps even the image of the Grim Reaper applies. Or something more infernal. 6 wings, 6 eyes, horns that could easily be mistaken for those of a devil. In the Bible, Satan is described as a great dragon, and the parallels are difficult to ignore. Possession, red eyes, being cast in opposition to divine authority. Feels kind of intentional. Even in Old English, Grima can mean mask, helmet, or even ghost. That too kind of feels deliberate. You can't really be killed. Much like a spirit. And he quite literally wears a mask, concealing that weird human face beneath it. And while we're talking about Grima's possible origins and inspirations, it makes sense that we turn our attention back to his creator. In real-world occult literature, Fornius is the name of a Marquis of Hell, a demon said to possess vast knowledge and great charisma. He allegedly commanded 29 legions of demons. The parallel is striking. The Fornius of Fire Emblem is likewise intelligent, ambitious, and intent on commanding an army. In his case, an army of the dead. The resemblance is especially fitting when he's directly referred to as the Demon Alchemist. And then there's the brand itself, the so-called Brand of the Defile. It seems obvious that Grima created it, and yet, could Fornius have had some hand in its design? After all, the death masks bore literal masks as a symbol of control, an extension of his obsession with domination and identity. However, there's no clear indication that Fornius explicitly created the brand symbol. Still, it's worth considering. In his madness, maybe already influenced by Grima's consciousness, did he carve that symbol into the door of his workshop? Was it devotion? Or was it already possession? And here's something else to consider, too. When Fornius fed Grima his blood, it may have not merely nourished his growth. It may have formed a blood pact, intentional or not. That could explain how Grima shared his consciousness with Fornius. How the two seemed to be able to peer into one another's minds. You learn in Awakening that even the Fire Emblem itself, Naga's sacred instrument, can be twisted into a tool for Grima's resurrection. In every conceivable way, he stands as Naga's antithesis.
I am the wings of despair. I am the breath of ruin. I am the fell dragon Grima.
It really isn't often you see a future as bleak as Lucina's. In most stories, there's always a way to fight back, some hidden strength, some final hope. But here, even in the best case scenario, Grima can't be really defeated, only sealed. And the people of the world must continue living with the knowledge that one day, he'll return. If that era is unprepared, they're doomed. We see this reality unfold in Lucina's future. Lucina, the crown princess of Elise, is the daughter of the exiled Chrom. In her timeline, Chrom is slain by the Fellblood, the very child who once escaped the Grimwheel's grasp, only to return as Grima's vessel. The dragon succeeded. He was fully resurrected. And with him came the death masks, now known as the Risen. It would seem that Grima was not the only creation of Fornius's to endure across the centuries. His undead army survived as well, repurposed under the Fell Dragon's command. Grima possesses the power to raise the dead, swelling his ranks endlessly with the fallen. Among these abominations are the 12 Dead Lords, the very same dread generals once seen in Jugdral. How they found their way to Elise is, well, no one knows. The shepherds, the main cast, were slaughtered by the monstrosity. By that point, Grima had all but completed his annihilation of humanity. The only ones left with even a chance of striking back were the surviving children of the shepherds. To perform the Rite of Awakening, one requires both the falchion and the fully restored fire emblem. The problem? The emblem couldn't be completed in their time. Even so, Lucina journeyed to Mount Prism, hoping Naga might offer some form of salvation. But her answer wasn't what they had hoped for. The rite couldn't be performed. There would be no sealing, no victory, no reclaiming their world. But there was another way. The children could save humanity, not by fighting in the present, but by returning to the past and rewriting history before it reached this point of ruin. It's a solution, yes, it offers hope, but imagine what that must feel like. To stand before a being like Naga and be told, in essence, it's over. Nothing left for you here. Go back. Try again. Hope in that moment is indistinguishable from surrender. But the children resolve to return to the past. They have to wait 3 days for the Outrealm Gate to open, though. All the while, Grima continues his assault on Elise. The Risen roam unchecked. The world they are leaving behind is actively collapsing. Before departing, Lucina is given a mask by Jerome to conceal her identity. She fears that revealing who she really is could destabilize the timeline even further. And so, once the gate opens, she and the other children step through, abandoning the only world they have ever known. But they aren't alone. Lucky them. Grima learns of their plan. He and a legion of Risen pursue them through the portals. The passage through time is unstable, violent even. During the crossing, the body of Grima's vessel, Robin, is gravely damaged. To correct this, Grima seeks out Robin's past self, intending to claim that body instead and ensure his resurrection proceeds uninterrupted. But the possession fails, and he's forced to retreat. And yet something changes. Because their consciousnesses were briefly intertwined, Robin retained fragments of Grima's memories, shattered bits of that ruined future. Though fractured and incomplete, those glimpses grant him knowledge no one else possesses. The failed possession may have left him with amnesia, but it also leaves him with insight. And in time, that insight becomes the key, not merely to sealing Grima once more, but to ending his reign for good. Shortly after the failed possession, Robin encounters the shepherds, Crom, the current Prince of Elise, his sister Lissa, and their retainer Frederick. Robin quickly realizes he remembers almost nothing of his past, save for his remarkable talent as a tactician. He joins the shepherds and soon becomes an indispensable member of their ranks during the Elise-Plegia War. There's a certain irony here. Part of Grima's eventual downfall stems from his own recklessness. By inadvertently leaving fragments of his memories within Robin, and by pursuing Lucina through time, he disrupted the very flow of history he once dominated. Events that unfolded one way in Lucina's original timeline begin to shift. The assassination of Emran and Elise Stoll fails. Baladar is killed, though not permanently. Through his power as the Fell Dragon, Grima restores him to life. We don't see Grima in the flesh again until the Valm campaign. When the shepherds seek Valadar's aid in the coming war, they encounter his Hierophant. At first, they dismiss the figure as little more than some sort of religious functionary. But this is Grima, inhabiting Robin's future body. After the failed possession attempt, Grima had no choice but to retreat into his original vessel. Still damaged from the violent passage through time, he remained in hiding, regaining his strength. The shepherds may not have understood it then, but the appearance of the Hierophant signaled inevitable catastrophe. Eventually, the shepherds reach the Dragon's Table, just as they had in Lucina's ruined future. But this time, they're prepared. They slay Valadar. What they fail to anticipate, however, is that if they can alter their fate, so can Grima. He appears once more in the body of future Robin, fully restored and ready to begin his reign of terror anew. This time, he no longer needs the present Robin as a vessel. He departs to complete his final preparations, and Crom, wielding the falchion and full emblem now, can finally perform the awakening rite. When the ritual concludes, he unleashes the full power of the falchion. The stage is set for the final battle, still, in my view, one of the most striking final boss settings in the series. Naga teleports the army onto Grima's back, yet despite all their preparation, the Fell Dragon nearly annihilates them upon arrival. The shepherds are brought to the brink of death almost instantly. Grima offers Robin one final chance to join him, and he refuses. In response, he traps him within a void, forcing him to watch as his friends are slaughtered. But, say it with me now, every villain's fucking nightmare, wow, it's the power of friendship! Who wrote this shit? Because Robin and Grima share a connection, there is one final option. The falchion can only seal the dragon, but if Robin strikes the final blow, it would be as though Grima perished by his own hand. He'd be destroyed completely. The cost, however, is severe. Killing Grima in this manner would also mean Robin's death. Yet, Robin survives. How? The explanation is left deliberately ambiguous. Perhaps divine intervention. Perhaps the strength of human bonds. Perhaps something else entirely. But for the first time since his creation, all that time ago, Grima is truly gone.
Welcome back. It's over now.
You know, despite all the time that's passed since the release of Awakening, Grima still stands as my favorite antagonist in the series, especially after the expansion of his lore and echoes. That game did an excellent job of fleshing out his origins, and the parallels to the Lopterian cult of Jugdral are genuinely fascinating. The similarities are striking, and they add a layer of historical continuity that makes the world feel interconnected in a way that's easy to overlook at first. He has quite a big effect on all three 3DS games. In Awakening, that impact is obvious, but if my theory regarding Duma was somehow true, then the consequences would extend even further. Shadows of Valentia might never occur as we know it. The first falchion may have never been forged. The war between Duma and Naga might have never unfolded in the same way, if at all. Even in Fates, Ananko specifically summons three heroes from release because of their role in defeating the Fell Dragon. If Grima had never existed, the events of Fates could have played out pretty differently. There's far more to Grima than I initially realized. Every time I revisit the lore or dive into discussions and analysis, I'm struck by just how layered and interconnected the mythology of this series is. I'm sure the series will continue to introduce compelling and memorable villains as it evolves, but I'm not certain any of them will ever hit quite as hard as the ultimate embodiment of calculated, inevitable ruin, Grima.